Hello, this is Algebra C, page 5, question 32 through 36. Question 32 is another completing the square question. So as I talked about in question 31, first thing you're going to do is get rid of the plus 23 or the plus part over here by subtracting it to the other side. X squared minus 12 equals negative 23. We want to figure out what we need here to complete the square. In order to do that, you take that middle term, negative 12, divide it by 2, which is negative 6. That's going to be what's on the inside here. In order to figure out what's the plus or minus part, you're going to square that number, which is 36. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. This right here is what's going to allow me to factor it into this, which is what we want. Negative 23 plus 6 is, sorry, that's actually supposed to be plus a 36. We had a 36 over there. I don't know why I just wrote 6. Negative 23 plus 36 will leave you with 13. So I'm going to have positive 13 here. In order to get rid of this square here, we're going to take the square root of both sides. That will cancel this out. All I'm left with is the inside. Square root of 13 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to go ahead and take an approximation of it. You type it into the calculator. So I'm going to go with plus or minus 3.6. That's rounded to the nearest tenth. So you're going to have two separate answers. X minus 6 equals the positive 3.6, and x minus 6 will equal negative 3.6. Adding 6 to both sides. Hold on, make sure I line up my decimal point there. Add 6 to both sides. X equals x equals 9.6, and then over here x is going to equal 6 minus 3.6 will give you 2.4. So I'm going to have my two answers. X equals 9.6. Separate your answers with a comma, and 2.4. Next question, question 33, asks you to use the Pythagorean theorem. This is my favorite theorem. I love the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C is always the hypotenuse, which is the longest side. Right here is our hypotenuse. It's always directly across from the right angle. So I'm going to set this up. It's 18 squared plus b squared, we don't know b, equals 30 squared. 18 times 18 is 324, plus b squared equals 30 times 30, which is 900. In order to solve for b squared, we need to get rid of the 324, so I'm going to subtract. B squared is equal to 576. Take the square root of both sides. B will equal, square root of 576 is 24. Now, in the completing the square, we saw that when we took the square root, we would have a positive and a negative answer. This time, we're only going to keep the positive because we're talking about a side length, and so that's not going to be the negative answer, so it's kind of erroneous. We don't really need it, so we only focus on the positive. Since these are both measured in inches, it's 24 inches. Question 34, it's asking you to simplify the product. When you have two square roots and you're multiplying, you can put them just all underneath one square root. So I have 7y times, and I'm going to break 28 down into its prime factorization, which is 7 times 4. Break that down 2 times 2. So really this is 7 times 2 times 2. Break down that y to the third. 1, 2, 3. Since this is a square root, you need pairs in order to pull something out. So here we have 2 7s. so they can join together. 1 7 will come out. The other one won't be there anymore. We have a pair of 2's, so again, you'll be able to take one out. We have 2 y's, so you can take one of those out. As well as, here's another pair of y's, so you can take out a y, and you'll actually have nothing left in there. So we're going to have 7 times 2 is 14, y times y is y squared. So this simplifies to 14y squared. Here we're going to do the same thing. Go ahead and break down that 10 into 5 and 2. So I'm going to write, we have 5x times 5 times 2 times x times x times x. We have 2 5's, so you can pull out a 5. The other one goes away. We have a pair of 2's over here, so you can pull out an x. So we pulled out a 5, we pulled out an x. We have another pair of 2's, so we can pull that out. And then we have a 2 left in there all alone with nobody, so it cannot get out of the square root. 5, x times x is x squared. Square root of 2 would be the simplified version. Now the reason why I needed 2 of something is this is the square root. It has an invisible 2. If it was a cubed root, I would need 3 of something. If there was a 4 there, we'd need 4 of something to bring something out, 5, etc. For question 36, you are going to have to simplify the radical expression. We're not allowed to leave radical signs like this in the denominator. So we have to multiply everything by what's called the conjugate to get rid of that radical sign in the denominator. The conjugate is just this whole denominator with the opposite sign in front of the radical. So instead of being a plus sign, it's going to be a minus. When I multiply the bottom by, I have to multiply the top by. The reason why, if I multiply the top and bottom by the same number, that's really a fancy version of 1. So that's why we're allowed to do it. So if I'm going to multiply each of these, we need to distribute this 2 times the square root of 3 times 3. So you're just going to multiply the front numbers. 2 times 3 is 6, so square root of 3. Multiply this by the square root of 2. So you're going to have minus sign 2, the square root of 3, and the square root of 2 together are going to make the square root of 6. You're just multiplying those two together. Over. This time we're going to multiply by the conjugate, and what's going to happen is your middle term will cancel out when you FOIL. So remember, our FOIL is first, so multiplying the first numbers. 3 times 3 is 9. Outer, 3 times the negative square root of 2. So we're going to have negative 3 times the square root of 2. Inner, so that's plus 3 times the square root of 2. And then the last is going to be square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which would give you the square root of 4, and we know that the square root of 4 is equal to 2. And since there's a negative sign in front of one of them, it's going to be a minus 2. What happens is these two terms are going to cancel out. So I'm left with 6 over the square root of 3, 6 times the square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 6. All over, these cancel out, so I have 9 minus 2. I can simplify that 9 minus 2 to a 7. So I have 6 square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 6 all over 7. And this is simplified now because we do not have a radical sign in the denominator. That's all for these notes. Check out the Algebra C page 6 notes for the final section.